test flight. Building on the history of Saturn V Apollo, returning pad 39A to interplanetary mission. We're getting ready to throttle down for max Q. You've heard the call out. Vehicle is supersonic. Side boosters are now throttling back up to full power. We're past max Q, the period of maximum loads on the vehicle. Next up, we'll be waiting for the side boosters to begin to throttle down prior to booster engine cutoff and separation 2.5 minutes into flight. GNC trajectory looks good on the Falcon Heavy. Reports show that the M1D engine performance is nominal.
Contact engine has begun.
Side boosters have begun to throttle down in preparation for the upcoming shutdown in 20 seconds.
Side boosters landing legs have deployed.
And the Falcons have landed.
OZ1, OZ2, both side boosters have touchdown. Landing off the road, moving on to 11.1,
Coming up very shortly.
5, 4, 3, 2, 0.
I made that little oval to show the approximate size of that hill in the distance. 30 seconds at about 10 miles per hour. That's 440 feet. Cut it in half if you want to, but those hills in the background there have to be at least a half a mile away. And that hill hasn't changed size at all. The brightness of the ground hasn't changed either. Man, that's a big sound stage and an awful bright light.
China did not just take the very first pictures of the dark side of the moon. See for yourself. From collectiveevolution.com. By Arjun Walia. The facts. China recently landed a probe on the dark side of the moon. Mainstream media claims that these are the first ever pictures taken, but that's false. It's the first time we've landed there, but we've seen photographs of this side in the past. Reflect on. Why are there so many examples, and credible sources, regarding what's happening on the backside of the moon, yet they go completely ignored by mainstream media? This makes no sense. What is going on here? An article on the popular website, IFL Science reads, "These are the first images ever taken from the far side of the moon." The topic has to do with China's space program, as they've landed the Chang'e 4 probe, in the von Karman crater, in the southern hemisphere on the far side of the moon, the side that's never visible from Earth. There is one mistake that this media outlet, and multiple other mainstream media outlets are making: these aren't the first pictures of the dark side of the moon, it's simply the first time we've ever landed on the dark side of the moon. However, even that may be questionable, given that there is a secret space program in existence. This became even more evident when $21 trillion went missing from the Department of Defense. Investigations uncovered that these funds may be going towards black budget programs that the commander-in-chief know nothing about. Paul Hellyer, ex-Canadian Defense Minister. After the landing, the Chinese probe sent back images from the dark side of the moon. It's no doubt a major milestone for space exploration. The probe will also spend the coming months using its instruments to analyze the untouched surface, potentially helping scientists learn more about the structure and geology of the moon, which is an area that scientists know little about. I recently wrote an article emphasizing this, illustrating how many reputable scientists have published papers and believe that the moon may actually be artificially made, suggesting that some sort of intelligence was behind its creation, and that it may be hollow. You can read that linked below. Now I'd like to discuss why these aren't the first images ever taken of the dark side of the moon. Members of the Society for Planetary SETI Research recently published a paper in the Journal of Space Exploration about certain features on the far side of the moon that appear in the crater Paracelsus C. The study argues that these features may be artificial in origin, meaning that perhaps another intelligent life form built them and put them there. One of the lead authors of that paper is the legendary Mark J. Carlotto. Carlotto is an aerospace engineer with over 30 years of experience in satellite imaging, remote sensing, signal and image processing, pattern recognition, and app development. He received a PhD in electrical engineering from Carnegie Mellon University in 1981, and has published over 100 technical articles and 7 books. In the paper, the authors use an analysis of lunar reconnaissance orbiter images that were taken from Apollo 15. At first glance, these structures appear to be walls or towers on the lunar surface. By combining multiple images, we show the larger feature, oriented in a northeast-southwest direction, is not simply a wall, but 2 walls on either side of a narrow valley or passageway. Using single image shape from shading and 3D terrain visualization, we show in a computer-generated perspective view, looking northeast, that the southwest end appears to be the entrance to the passageway. A reverse angle view, looking southwest, shows the passageway ending at a rise of terrain at the other end, possibly leading underground. The terrain surrounding the 2 structures is not flat but appears excavated by some unknown mechanism, natural or artificial. That right there proves that these are not the first ever images taken of the backside of the moon. However, this is the first time we've landed a probe on the far side of the moon. The Clementine mission. Let's not forget the 1994 Clementine mission to the moon. This was part of a joint space project between the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization and NASA. They made some fascinating discoveries, as the mission is known for discovering water at the moon's poles. The deputy manager for that mission, Dr. John Brandenburg, the inventor of the MET, microwave electrothermal, plasma thruster, using water propellant for space propulsion, said that this mission was actually a photo reconnaissance mission, to check out artificial structures that the government allegedly knew about on the dark side of the moon. He made these statements in the documentary, Aliens on the Moon. He also made some interesting statements in this lecture linked below. He has many publications in various journals, and is clearly brilliant, but is made to look like a fringe scientist, or a complete quack. There are now hundreds of people, with similar backgrounds, blowing the whistle on what's really happening on the moon, which is why these recent pictures from China are concerning. China has released hundreds of images. At least The Guardian got it right. Martin Weiser, a scientist at the Swedish Institute of Space Physics, and principal investigator on one of the instruments on board the Chang'e, said, "We know the far side from orbital images and satellites, but we don't know it from the surface. It's uncharted territory, and that makes it very exciting." Debunking strange occurrences on the dark side of the moon. $21 trillion were reported missing from the Pentagon. Michigan State professor and economist Mark Skidmore and former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Catherine Austin Fitts, found that this money was going towards black budget programs. Fitts has been quite outspoken about a secret space program, and so have hundreds of others, like the former Canadian Defence Minister Paul Hellyer, stating that there are trillions of dollars going into these black budget programs. When it comes to the moon, you can learn more linked below. For a long time, there has been misinformation and ridicule associated with UFO and the extraterrestrial phenomena, which in some cases may be separate issues. This was well illustrated by the very first director of the CIA, Roscoe H. Hillenkoetter, who was quoted by the New York Times in 1960, stating that, behind the scenes, high-ranking Air Force officers are soberly concerned about UFOs, but through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe the unknown flying ships are nonsense. Roscoe is one of hundreds of former high-ranking government employees to blow the whistle on what's really going on. Here is another great testimony, which was from Victor Marchetti, a former special assistant to the deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency. We have indeed been contacted, perhaps even visited, by extraterrestrial beings, and the US government, in collusion with the other national powers of the Earth, is determined to keep this information from the general public. Second Look, Volume 1, Number 7, Washington, D.C., May 19, 79. Furthermore, there are many credible sources that have alluded to the fact that NASA commonly airbrushes photos. Norman Bergrun is a great example of that, and he is only one of multiple sources. The fact of the matter is that something is clearly going on, and for decades, it's quite clear that there is a group of powerful people who do not want this information to be disclosed. This is a picture that represents what I'm talking about, a photo we've never seen that comes from Bergrun. According to Bergrun, the pictures NASA got back from Voyager, in 1980 from Saturn, were so mind-altering that they locked them up. This is a picture of a luminous source that seems to be intelligently controlled, based on its movements. Here it's photographed, hovering just outside of Saturn's outer ring. You can fit multiple Earths inside the rings, so this craft seems to be about the size of our planet. Bergrun was a scientist and engineer, and part of NASA's Voyager program. He worked at NASA for decades, at Ames Research Center, and also worked at Lockheed Martin, where he managed the Polaris missile tests. Norman got frustrated later in life that the decision was made not to tell the public what they photographed. He gave an illuminating interview in 2010 on this subject, and has traveled all the way to Scotland to get his book, The Ring Makers of Saturn, published. You can read more about that story linked in the description. Let this be an example of how we are only shown what they want us to see. There is still a lot of misinformation spread about UFO and extraterrestrial phenomena, particularly within the mainstream media. You can check out the article below that goes into what's going on right now with mainstream UFO disclosure. The takeaway: it's important to recognize how easy it is for the elite and space agencies to control and alter the narrative. They choose what to disclose and how to disclose it through mainstream media. The recent lunar probe landing by China on the far side of the moon is a perfect example of that, as it could be used to debunk possible artificially made structures on the dark side of the moon. What this means is that we have to do our own research and stay away from conventional sources that most of us use to find information. If we really want to know about something, and even offer an opinion about something, it's best to look into it ourselves and utilize our critical thinking skills.